How's it going, guys? Today we have a little bit of a public service announcement for you guys. Whenever you see a car that's like listed for sale or something and it says mechanic owned, yeah, that doesn't mean it was taken care of very well. It means it was neglected to the point of bare minimum operation. Good example is this puppy right here. This is my wife's Daily. It's a 2012 G37 Journey, and we bought it in 2013 with like 20,000 miles on it. It's coming up on 100,000 miles now, and all I've done is change the battery. Yeah. So last year, it started overheating a little bit, and during the dead of summer, whenever you'd like be stopped a little too long in traffic, temperature would start creeping up a little bit. So being my wife's Daily, I couldn't really be bothered to deal with it, and just kind of left it like that. And it wasn't really a problem unless you're stuck in traffic for like 20 or 30 minutes or something. But that was toward the end of summer, and once you're into like winter, it really wasn't a problem anymore. Fast forward to this year, and being as how it's Arizona and it's an average temperature of 981 degrees outside, my wife was sitting in traffic at the kids' school to pick them up, and she said she saw a little bit of steam come out the hood, and then she noticed that the temp gauge was like on the H, and she called me and asked me what to do, and I'm like, you should probably turn that off, or at least turn the heater on and try and just dissipate some of that heat or something. And she said that nothing was really working, and so she had to just keep turning the car off until she got somewhere where she could park. I told her just to let it sit for a little bit and cool down, and apparently it wasn't really cooling down at all. It was still staying pretty much on the H the whole time. So I went to pick them up, and I ended up driving this back home. Keep in mind, this is like a block away, so it's not far at all. And it took me like, I don't know, 25 minutes to get back home. I kept driving like, I don't know, 50 meters at a time, just because it would get so hot to the point where it just wouldn't run anymore. Like it would literally start like clanking and popping and jerking, and I literally thought we killed it at that point. Like,
hey, yo, Monty, he thinks I'm dead. Look at his face, he's behind it.
I probably should have like tried towing it or gone and get a tow strap or something, since we have something that can tow now, but it was like a block away, so I didn't think that was necessary. I just kept waiting, turning it off, turning it back on, and I noticed that the fans weren't turning on that whole time, with the temp gauge being like pegged pretty much. So I thought that was weird, because that might be a sign of what's wrong with it. If the fans fail, then obviously it's going to overheat. There's no airflow going through the radiator to dissipate the heat from the coolant. That's a big red flag right there. Another obvious sign when I opened the hood was that there's dried coolant toward the back of the engine. That's obviously a big red flag too, because obviously if you have a leak, the coolant gets out, the coolant can't transfer the heat from the engine, and it's going to overheat. It's not a whole lot of coolant, so it kind of lines up with what she said about there being just a little steam and it overheating, because there's not a whole lot of stains from dried coolant. There's just a little bit on the firewall back there, and that's about it. But when I checked the coolant in front, it's pretty much empty. I don't know if we've been losing coolant over time or something, but when I turned it on last night after letting it sit for a few hours, it did turn back on just fine and revved and ran totally normal. So I was very grateful for not having to pull this thing out and do head gaskets on it, because that would have sucked. I probably wouldn't even bother with that, or just throw another engine in it or something. But luckily it's fine. So now what we got to do is try and find out where that leak is coming from. And we can't do that if there's not enough coolant in it. So step number one is refilling it and see what happens. To get a funnel so you don't spill coolant everywhere. And make sure you have a good quality funnel. All right, so we're gonna top it off with some coolant that I got. Make sure that you have the appropriate coolant for your vehicle. This is, well, it's an Infiniti, but it's really a Nissan with the nice suit on. Nissan uses blue coolant, and we use this brand just because, well, because it's the only one that's available that I've seen at like Target, O'Reilly's. And it says Nissan right on the bottle, so that makes it kind of easy. If you don't know what kind to use, you can generally just go by the color that's already in your car. So like if your coolant is green, get green coolant. If your coolant is pink, get pink coolant. Our coolant's blue, we got blue coolant. The big thing to note there is you don't want to mix colors, like ever. Some of them can have a reaction to where they turn into like jelly if they mix. So that's a big no-no. And if you happen to like not have coolant and just have water in the system, then I don't know what to tell you. Get some coolant in there. Water is actually the best thermal conductor you can have as far as coolant, but it's also corrosive, especially on like iron engine blocks and stuff like that. So you don't want to just put straight coolant in there. You want to always have some other kind of antifreeze additive in there. A lot of guys that I know, like on their drift cars and stuff, will just use distilled water with an additive in it, like water wetter or something like that. We just use the regular recommended coolant. There's quite a bit of coolant that's missing. And I hear some bubbling noises coming from back here now. All right, so it looks like we found our culprit. As you can see right there, that heater hose is a little wet on that coupling area. And actually, if you move it, it's completely broken. So that explains a lot. So luckily it looks pretty easy to get to. So it shouldn't be a big deal, but we need another coupling of that size. But that breaking doesn't really make sense either. I don't see how that would just randomly break. It looks like maybe the pressure would have built up too much and caused it to rupture. Still kind of pointing toward the fans because I haven't heard them come on since yesterday, so I'm still kind of leaning that way. I don't know, it also could be that the temp sensor just didn't have anything to read anymore, so that's why the fans weren't turning on. Yeah, we have our first thing to fix now, so let's get that taken care of. All right, so now that we know what's wrong, we can make the first of what's probably many trips to the store. Be right back. And we're back. All right, so what we got from Lowe's is a 3/4 inch mil to 3/4 inch mil barb fitting. And this should replace the little plastic coupling that was in there from the factory. One note is that they do sell replacements at like AutoZone. I've seen them just sell like replacement plastic couplings like that. I'd rather put a metal piece in there than another plastic piece. So that's why I went with this from Lowe's instead. So now it's just a matter of putting this back, then putting the clamps back. I probably should have gone to get more coolant while I was out. So that's probably gonna be trip number 2. And then see if it runs after that. All right, so I got the clamps off with some just needle nose. You wanna be real careful with these because they're pretty strong and they'll fly right out and hit something if you're not careful. Hopefully not your eye. I managed to get pieces of the factory coupling out. And yeah, it's pretty obvious why it leaked. It was just kind of falling apart. I wasn't able to get it out in one piece. I tried to get it out and it just started falling apart. All right, so now we're gonna overfill it a bit. And we want to do this to bring the water level up higher than anywhere else on the engine. That way we can try and bleed some of the bubbles out. You want to at least try this anytime that you've been completely out of coolant, like in this case. It wasn't completely out, but we went through about 1.5 gallons. So almost empty. Now we're gonna start it and let it idle until all the bubbles and stuff come out. And you can see bubbles coming out already. And looks like we need to add a little more. As the bubbles come up, the fluid level is gonna keep dropping. You just don't want to overfill it, because in the event that it stops dropping, then you're probably gonna spill most of that coolant. So you just want to add a little bit at a time. Another thing that'll help is turning your heater on. That way, if there's a bypass valve in the heater system somewhere, that'll open and let the coolant flow through that circuit as well. You guys can see there's still some bubbles coming out. You just pretty much want to wait till that stops. All right, so I've been driving for about 15 minutes now. Made a trip to the school and back and just drove around a bit. Temp gauge looks normal now. It's slightly below center, which was where it always used to be. Let's do a little pull here. Give it some sauce, see if that does anything. Well, it's not blown up, so that's good. Now I think next step should be just to take it back to the garage and let it sit idling for a bit and see if it still holds temperature there. See you guys back at the house. All right, so you can see the hose that we repaired right there, or the coupling, and it looks pretty dry. So does everything else in the area. You can kind of see all the caked up coolant from before, but there's nothing new that I can see. Temp still looks good. Check engine light came on also. I'm gonna guess that that's an engine over temp code, but I'll check it here in a bit. Another thing to check off the list is that the fans are spinning. Can't really see them from here. But yeah, the fans are working, so it's one less thing to worry about. It's been idling for about 5 minutes now, on top of driving for like almost half an hour, I think. All right, so now we're gonna check the code for that check engine light. For this, I'm using NDS Light 3. I have a Bluetooth OBD2 connector. It's an Amazon one. I'll put the link for that down below. All right, yeah, so 2 faults. Engine over temp, like I was guessing. The other one, fuel system lean, bank 1. That might also be because of the temperature, because it was so hot. Because it was knocking and stuff. Like I said earlier, I thought it developed rod knock for a second because it was just knocking so loudly. But we can go ahead and clear these. And this app's really cool because we can also check all the parameters for the engine, like RPMs, speed, battery, water temp. That's an important one. We're at 101 degrees Celsius, I believe, which I think is normal for this car. Throttle, power steering. And And yeah, so check engine light is off now. It's just your typical tire pressure sensor light being on. So I think we're all good now. All right, so we got all the plastic covers back on the engine. We got the codes cleared. I guess I'll probably just keep an eye on that and see if that Bank 1 lean code comes back, and I guess investigate that a little more if that's a separate issue. But I'm pretty sure it just had more to do with the combustion chamber being super hot. Other than that, I think we're done for today. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully this thing stays in one piece. Find out next time on the next episode of Garage 23.